Hey everyone, Will here with a brand new episode of LFG. I'm joined here today by Brandon, of course, but we're doing something a bit different today. Normally, we'd cover a film or TV show that's already been released, but on this episode, we'll be covering something that's not actually out yet. There's a new anime-inspired fantasy series coming out called Gabriel and The Guardians, based on stories from the Book of Genesis and other ancient Mesopotamian tales. It's about a trio of heroes led by Gabriel, who's a celestial being, who are on a journey to recover a powerful artifact capable of reshaping creation itself. Along the way, they will brave untold dangers, confront ancient evils, and unravel secrets that could change their world forever. So, Brandon and I are also joined by the creators of this series today, who are going to tell us about the development process and a bit more about what they have in store for us.
So we've got Jason Moody, we've got David Cunningham, we've got Albert Moore. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Doing great, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're glad to be here, man.
Of course.
Yes.
Exciting.
Yeah, I've been
It'll
looking
be
forward to
fun.
this episode for a long time. I think it's really awesome. We're talking about your guys' new project, Gabriel and The Guardians. And before we dive super deep into all that, I kind of wanted to get our audience to be more familiar with you guys. Give you guys an opportunity now to get into your background. The creation of Colossul Studios, all of that.
Yeah.
So Jason, how did you get into filmmaking, animation, into this world? What led you to that? What led to Gabriel and the Guardians?
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, it really, started as a kid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that journey begins for most of us when we're sitting in front of a TV as a youngin, and whatever magical program that comes on before us and captivates us and captures us, and you can't look away. That's the thing that probably sticks with you. And so for me, I think honestly, He-Man was not the first. The first big love for me was I'm 5 years old and just in love with Masters of the Universe, and just recognizing that it was in this format that was just so graphic and visual, and it's as a baby, basically an infant nearly. It's you're just trying to imagine what is this thing, and then as you get older you realize okay, these are cartoons and I like them a lot, you know what I mean? I love these cartoons, and that just turns into this lifelong passion that never really went away for me. You know what I mean? That turned into, it starts with He-Man and Thundercats and Silverhawks and some of those really 80s, early 80s, any of the action oriented Hanna-Barbera, Space Ghost and stuff like that, and then it was all sort of grayed out by these 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that just for me, that was it. That was everything for the next, honestly almost a decade for me. Was Ninja Turtles was all I was about, to the point where I was I don't even need other toys. All I need is Ninja Turtle toys. You know what I mean? I get rid of everything else. I don't want anything else. Just turtles. And so I think that's where that it started with He-Man, but it really crystallized with the Ninja Turtles, and I was I'm a cartoon kid, you know what I mean? That's what I'm into, and then that turns into, well, I don't want to just watch them, I want to make them, you know what I mean? It's not enough just to sit there passively and consume it. I'm drawing out. I'm trying to draw every character I see, and then eventually that it's not enough to just draw. You get really good at that, right? I got great at drawing Ninja Turtles, but it was well, I want to draw my own characters. You know what I mean? And so then that honestly just turned into me having sketchbooks. I was never without a sketchbook. Everywhere I went, I was taking a sketchbook with me, and I was drawing and creating characters. And then you find other people who like to do that too. You know what I mean? You go to the lunch table and you find the other kids that have sketchbooks, and now you're drawing in their sketchbook and they're drawing in your sketchbook, and you're sharing characters and you're imagining together. And that's kind of where that's where that fostered for me. And then you hit the real world, when you graduate high school and you realize like, oh, I can't, this is, I thought I was going to get into making cartoons, and it's like, that's really hard if you're from the Midwest, in the 90s, and it's internet's just at the beginning of what it is, and it's like you have no contacts. And so that's kind of where I tried to get into comics. I like got a comic book published that was like nationwide. It's actually a pretty decent story. I like, when that kind of thing happens, you're just like, well, this is it. I did it.
What's the comic called?
It was called Scarlet Veronica. It was an indie comic published by Ape Entertainment, which was a small publisher in the 2000s. But they published, they published nationwide. So our book was I had a 4-issue miniseries that was in shops nationwide, and went to Wizard Worlds, all over the place, selling books and signing books and all that. And we did good. Like, our publisher was like, hey, the first issue did really well. We got covered. There used to be a really, really popular website called Ain't It Cool News. And so like we were featured on Ain't It Cool News, and like, we were like certified cool by Previews Magazine. And we sold like 2,000 copies of our first issue, which at that time they were like, that's really great. And it was all said and done, right? Like, and I was like, okay, like, where's the check? Like, where's the money? They were like,
what check?
Yeah, they were like, oh, there's no money in this. And I was like, what
money? What are you talking about?
I'm like, I'm in the hole. I spend my own money to go to all these comic book conventions. I spend my own gas money, and they're like, no, dude. They're like, we broke even. Like, your book paid for the cost of publishing and marketing. So great job. Let's do another book. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if this is going to be for me. You know what I mean? And so I ended up getting into like an instructional design. I got into e-learning, and then I spent the next 15 years working in tech and e-learning. And so it wasn't until COVID, honestly. Like, I wasn't even in that space. I wasn't even thinking about it because I was fine with what I was doing, building like e-learning and training and stuff like that for JP Morgan Chase. And then it was around COVID that, just like we were all bored, right? Like, there was nothing to do. Like, we were all just sitting at home. Like, I couldn't go into work. My job got super slow. So they just kept on paying us, but I only had like 5 hours of work to do. And so I just started, imagining. I was listening to a podcast actually about the book of Genesis, and was just fascinated by it. Like, I grew up in the church. And so, I'd gone to Sunday school and learned all those stories, but this podcast was really diving deep, and it was like kind of revealing some things that I just never, the first thing that hit me was like, they're talking about giants in the story of Noah. And it was like, in the days of Noah, there were giants that walked the earth. And I was like, what? There's giants that walked the earth in the days of Noah.
Yeah, I remember when that Russell Crowe movie came out, and a lot of people were very confused when the big giants came out. Even like my church going, because I grew up Christian as well. And they were like, what is that about the giant? It's like, it's in the book. It says that.
Yeah, I actually like they definitely took some liberty, but I've had to since tell people, I'm like, Aronofsky wasn't as off the reservation as I think a lot of the Christians think. I'm like, he's pulling from, I've now read the Book of Enoch. I know exactly what he's pulling from.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff, and I definitely want to deep dive into that as we go further.
Yeah, and so that sort of opened things up for me in terms of like, oh, this would be a crazy cool way to approach some of these topics, and some of this beautiful ancient text, this beautiful book that, is there a kind of a fresh way, a fantasy take that we could do? And so that's kind of where it started to birth from.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. David, how did you end up in on all this, and what was your background like leading into this?
I will say that might have felt like an awkward place to stop, but I stopped specifically because that is sort of the entree of
I think it's a perfect setup for. I think that was that you got everything in there. You got the whole timeline in there. I really appreciate
breath
it.
here for David to come in and pick.
Yeah. I mean, I had I had like a similar kind of childhood thing with cartoons. My friends in high school would make fun of me because I still watched cartoons, and I thought they were dorks because they were talking about their girlfriends and stuff, and I was just like, "You guys watch Dragon Ball?" Like, you know? And so, you know, like I grew up with that and just, you know, like discovering anime, like man, probably like I think it was like early 90s. I think like the first anime that I saw was the original Vampire Hunter D, which was really dark for like a 9-year-old kid. But like,
I watched that in college.
Yeah, but I was like, wow, this is crazy. You can have like R-rated cartoons with like violence and craziness. And then, you know, like learning like, oh, there's this whole other thing. And discovering all these cool shows and a lot of like really beautiful stuff. Like I love Studio Ghibli and love their work. Love Dragon Ball too. And, you know, Naruto, all those shows.
That's my favorite anime is Dragon Ball.
Yeah. I mean, it's so great. It's such a fun, especially for me, at least, like going through the whole series when it was coming out, like on Toonami and stuff. And like, just like, it was like every week, just like looking forward to new episodes. It was so much fun. But yeah, so I always wanted to do this. I was like, kind of like went a roundabout way. I mean, like I kind of like wandered. I moved around for a bit after high school. I didn't know what I was gonna do. And like I lived on a farm for a year, and I lived in the wilderness in Colorado for a couple years, and had some really great times actually there. I was like super grateful for that. And then I like in 2007, I was just like I was kind of just like praying, and like I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. And I can kind of like I was like living in Colorado at 9,000 feet in literal like wilderness, making like $200 a month, and like just kind of, you know, a little bit, you know, and you know, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And so then I was like, I honestly, man, I was reading through the book of Exodus, and I read Exodus 31. And it was on the builder of the temple, and it talked about the builder of the temple, and the whole chapter was about the builder of the temple making like all the intricacies, all the details, all the beauty of making the temple. And it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, making beautiful things is important. Like, oh yeah, like it's important to make art. Like art's important. And I always wanted to work in animation. Always wanted to do this, but I always thought it was like a pipe dream. It was like, it's stupid. It's never gonna happen. And so, but then I read that and I was like, no, like, okay. Like, yeah, I was like, you know, praying about it and stuff. And so I was like, all right. So I was, so I like, man, I like went, like moved. I was like, all right, like I need to, like, I hate it when like I'm such a big critic of like films and stuff like that, you know, and I was like, man, I hate bad movies. I hate movies that suck. and I love movies that are really good. I'm like, you know, like I'm like the biggest fan of great movies, and I'm the biggest critic of bad movies.
That's all we do here on this podcast. Although I love bad movies too, though.
I mean, you know, it depends on which one, right? You know,
some bad movies. There's a place.
Well, I mean, you know, there's some of them are just so bad that they're fun. Like I love Mystery Science Theater. You know, that kind of fun. You know. But I was like, I need to become a good storyteller. And so like I was like, all right, well, I need to go like learn how to do this stuff. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to film school. I'm gonna get my master's degree in film, and I'm gonna go to like one of the best film schools in the country. I was like, that was the plan. And so like I set out on this plan. And it took a long time. It was like 7 years to get to grad school. And ended up going to grad school, and it was a good time. And I got there, and I kind of realized that everything that I was doing there, I could pretty much learn on my own. But
yes,
it was like
I truly believe in that. Yeah, you absolutely do not need to spend a whole ton of money. I took one screenwriting course, and I feel like I'm probably better at screenwriting than like half of like Hollywood film executives and stuff. Like I just watched like Madam Web this year and all kinds.
Oh man,
I'm like, I don't know who.
That is the peak of storytelling. Will peak storytelling.
It's for sure. Like I after I got a master's degree, I taught a class to some undergrad students. I taught like one class one semester, which was like really fun. And they were, I told them at one point, I said, they were asking me like, when you get into the industry, right? Like, and you know, everyone sees that you've got your animation degree. and you go to get a job. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No one cares about you having an animation degree. Nobody cares. And they were like, what? Why are we here? And I was like, well, you're here because it's socially acceptable to take 4 years out of your life to study your profession, and somebody will give you a low interest loan to do this. And I was like, and if you're not taking advantage of becoming a professional in these 4 years, you're wasting your freaking time. And they was like jaw dropped there. What? And I was like, yeah, you better be getting as good as a professional in these 4 years. That's it. Because when you get out, you're gonna have a ton of debt and you're not gonna be able to get a job in the industry. And so anyway, so I went to grad school and I got a job working at a small little studio right across the street, making this show called Superbook, which is where Al was working. That's where I met Al. Man, I started working there. I was started as an assistant, and I was just really hungry and really just like, driven. And so like I just tried to do everything I could to do more. So I just moved up, and like when there was an opportunity, somebody was like, hey, we need a preschool show. I was like, I've never seen a preschool show. I'll go learn about them, and then I'll pitch a preschool show, and I was just like, that's what I did. And, it was like, somebody was like, hey, could you do this? Could you do that? I'm like, yes, I can. And so I just I spent 6 years. I think I was there for 6 years, and I purposely would go to all the different departments. Like I'd go to pre-production, I'd go to production, go to post. I would talk to Al and bug him about what he was doing. I would talk to the different directors, and I just like kind of walking around like, hey, what does an animation director do? And I was trying to learn all the different things about animation so that like one day I could hopefully produce. And it was great. It was a great experience. Got to do fun things, work in development and do different things. And I decided for some reason, not for some reason, but I was like, I need to become a better writer. And I was like, the way you become a better writer is you write. So I had a friend who's like, well, you should just write a book. I was like, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll write a book. And so then I spent 5 years writing a novel. And so and it was like, wow, that was a lot of freaking work. And so I did that. And then I went and I worked on another show. I worked on the show called Gizmo Go, in this little animated series. That was a lot of fun. I got to do some voice work for that, which was super fun. And then I was working on the Wingfeather Saga, which is also with Angel Studios. And I got a cold message on LinkedIn from Jason, who I did not know. But his message is like, hey, man, I heard you were a good writer. Would you take a look at something I wrote? And I messaged him back, who told you that?
How did you find me?
How did you find me, dude? I'm like, I'm just working at tiny little things. How in the world did you find about me?
My number's unlisted.
This
I don't have a phone. How are you getting a hold of me? How is this happening?
So yeah. So I started talking to Jason, and we started working together, like just like I just first was just giving him notes and stuff, like Jason gave me his script, and I was like, I looked at it and I was like, what do I do here? Like, because I'm generally I'm a pretty nice person. Like my wife always tells me, she's like, sometimes you're like too nice to people. You need to be like more honest. And so I was like, okay. So like, cause I was like, do I be really nice and just tell him, yeah, good job, buddy? Or do I actually tell him what I think? And so I gave him just a ton of notes, and I figured I'd never hear from him again.
I was like, little did you know, I'm like, I was looking for that. I was like looking for someone I'd already been with I'd had enough people that had looked at my script and been like, this is cool. You know what I mean? Like, no, I don't have anything. I literally can't say anything about it, like outside of just like, wow, this is great. But I knew it wasn't good enough. Like I knew I wasn't from the industry, and I luckily I'd had someone tell me that they told me, look, it's not that your script is bad. This was someone from the industry. They were like, it's not that your script is bad. It's that it's very obvious that you don't know the process. Like they're like, there's a process of storytelling that is just, it's very obvious that it's not, that you don't know that. And so your script feels like it's written by someone who doesn't understand that. And so I was like, okay, cool. Well, what is it? And they were like, well, I don't, they were like,
yeah, you figure it out yourself.
The secret of Hollywood. You know, come back when you have your Hollywood card. You know, I was like, whatever, man. And so I'll find someone then, you know, and yeah, so then I reached out to David. So no, it didn't turn me off, right, David? I was like,
no. You were like, these are great. And I did, like, I was like, all right, I'm going to give him a bunch of notes, but I'm going to explain to him why I'm giving every note. I'm going to say, like, okay, like, this doesn't work because of this. You know, when you're trying to do this, this is what you really want to do, and blah, blah, blah. And like, you know, and I explained everything. And so, you know, we started talking more, and then we started talking like, hey, let's start writing a script together. We started doing that. And it was just like, I was like still working at Wing Feather. So I'm like doing this like nights and weekends. And, you know, I also like I've got 4 kids. And so I'm also like having like just kids are always coming, you know, and so it was a journey, and we started, Jason and I, we wrote a script together. And then when I wrote the script, I was thinking, I was like, oh man, like Jason and I, we both really wanted this to be like an anime. We love that style, you know, and like 2D. And I was like, well, I know this one guy who's got a lot of 2D animation experience, and he really knows his stuff. And he worked on some of my favorite movies, especially when I was growing up. And so that's when I called Al.
Who is that guy?
Yeah, who's this guy? We should have him on sometime.
Yeah.
legend.
Man, I wish we could get him.
We should get this guy. It'd be cool to talk to him. Yeah. How do I live up to that? No, I don't know. Yeah, no, it was crazy, right? So we were talking about this whole circle thing, like how David, you know, met Jason, and then David sent me the script, and I was reading through the script, and I was like, wow, this is really cool, you know? And so I was like, how the heck do I get involved in this thing? So I said that to David, and David was like, yeah, that's why I was sending it to you. I was hoping you'd want to be involved in it. And just tell you the crazy circle. So turns out right around the beginning of COVID, David and I are standing in the doorway to his office, and we're just talking. I don't even know what we're talking about. We're just talking about something. And then our friend, who's like a producer, comes walking across from his office, and he's like, you guys, you need to come over here, and you got to see this thing that someone just sent in. And we're like, what? And he was like, yeah, someone just sent this like little trailer in. And we were like, what are you talking about? This goes along with what Jason's saying, like stuff you just don't do. Like people don't cold send trailers and stuff. And so he's like, you got to come see this. So we walk over there and we're looking at it. And it was like, it was really cool. But I was like, dude, don't touch this project. And he's like, what? And I said, man, this thing looks like it looks like a little too close to Attack on Titan. I said, we're going to get sued if we touch this project. You know? And so that was the last of that, you know. I think I can't use his name, but he talked with Jason a little bit and still helped him out.
Yeah, little did we know that was. But
little did we know there was this circular connection forming way back then. We didn't even find that out, right? So David and I had forgotten about that, because it was some odd years later that we got connected to this project. And then one day we were all talking, and it's like, wait a minute, did you send that trailer in? And I was like, and we were all like, whoa. And so it was like this whole, you know, circle.
I had sent a really rough trailer, like concept trailer that I'd made just myself, and definitely used some inspiration from but it was like a proto Gabriel and the Guardians trailer that I had sent to their boss before I ever met them. I didn't even know that they worked there at the time. I had no idea. I just
totally crazy a couple years later to be like, what in the world, you know? And then it turns out, right, so then in another way, we have another partner who's overseas in the Philippines that I knew, because when I was in China, I worked in Beijing, China for a while, and I worked with her. And then we were looking for somebody, because we deal with overseas studios and stuff. So we were like, we need to have somebody overseas that can, you know, easily go and check on the studios and can manage the studios and can do all of these things. And we were going to go to the Philippines to do our work. So I'm like, I know someone in the Philippines. This is going to be great. Turned out Jason was working on another project with the same lady. So we're all interconnected, in some way. And and this is what I would say to people who are listening that want to get into animation: don't ever burn any bridges, because everybody knows everybody. So always be good to everybody you work with, because everybody, doesn't matter what portion of the globe they're in, they know each other. So
it's very true. It's a small industry.
Yeah, it's very, very small. Like I could go into stories about people applying for jobs, and I'm like, and then I call up somebody. It says, "Hey, they worked. The studios and names will remain, hidden for the protection of people." But someone calls up and like, "Hey, they're looking for a job with you," and I look at them and I'm like, "Studio did you work at? Oh, you work at the studio? Hey, you know this guy? Blah 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 blah." And they're like, "Don't mess with that person." Okay, answer my question. It's like everybody knows everybody. So just be careful out there. But yeah, my background is you guys are talking about animation and things. My intro to anime was probably Battle of the Planets or Gotcha Man. Back in like the 70s. That was my thing. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. But what really got me into filmmaking, probably a lot of people who are in filmmaking, was Star Wars. And I saw Star Wars in 1977. It was actually first run at a drive-in theater. So that's how old I am. And and I saw Star Wars there, and that just blew me away as a kid. I mean, it just blew me away. And I someday, I would get into it. I ended up it's crazy. I graduated from high school. I was young. I was like 17. I graduated from high school. I was in college, and Disney just happened to open up a studio in Orlando, Florida, at the time Disney MGM Studios, and they were looking for people to come in to for their Imagineers, to see what would this place look like with actual artists down there. So they called around to a lot of the local colleges and said, "Hey, can you, some of your art students down here, get them down here drawing and doing some stuff. We'll show them how to do some stuff, but we want to get a feel for what is this going to look like when we open to the public." So that was my first experience with Disney animation. And then I ended up coming back like 6 months later when they had a couple projects going at the time. It was Prince and the Pauper, which was a 30-minute Mickey short, and they were also working on Rescuers Down Under. And so I came in then, kind of interned, and then I got hired. So I got hired at Disney. I was 19, and I was in Disney animation for 14 years. Worked on Lion King, Pocahontas, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, basically everything. Mulan, Tarzan, Lilo and Stitch, Brother Bear.
Wow, like that whole like 90s renaissance.
Yeah.
Really.
But his favorite movie is The Emperor's New Groove.
Emperor's New Groove, man.
Yes.
See, little did I know, when Jason was like 14, he wrote Emperor's New Groove for me.
He was the one that got fired.
Like a Doogie Howser of Disney.
Yeah, that show, I mean, there's a whole Sting did a whole documentary on that show. Yeah, so that's all that needs to be said about that show. I didn't work on it, thank God. I was slated to work on it, and at the time I was slated to work on it, it was actually called Kingdom in the Sun. Everyone's getting some background here on Disney. It was called Kingdom in the Sun, and I was like, it was actually to me, I didn't like the end. Jason and David liked how it turned out. I can't stand the movie, but in the beginning it was darker, but I kind of liked it. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And but then they started running into, as you would see in the documentary that Sting shot, a lot of problems. And so we were all sitting around like, what are we gonna do? And this little project came along with this guy who swings through the trees on vines. And they're like, "You're on that one." And I was like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
So,
if anyone hasn't seen it, which probably is a good amount of people because it's super obscure, there's a documentary called The Sweatbox, and it's an unofficial documentary that Sting made about his time making music for Emperor's New Groove, and it's super fascinating. If you want to see what it's really like working at Disney, what it was like working at Disney in the 90s, Super fascinating. And Disney hated it. Disney hated that documentary.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. You know, all my Florida people will be happy I said this. That's what it was like working in California. Florida, so much better. There was no inner rivalries at Disney. You know, we were all one big happy team. But no. Yeah, Florida and LA, we were two separate. We were never even supposed to be an animation studio. We were always supposed to help them. And then we were so much better than what Disney expected us to be, right? They only expected us to help. That we ended up getting our first film, which was Mulan. And then from there, we did Lilo and Stitch and then Brother Bear. So, yeah, some background.
Good. No, thank you guys for really delving into that. I like piecing together the whole timeline of all you guys kind of coming together on this project. I think it's really fascinating seeing like all you guys, your histories and how that intertwines eventually into this one project.
You didn't know that when you asked that question, I was going to be like, in 1984, I was a young child watching cartoons.
No, I did want to know. I absolutely wanted to go back and because I really am, I work on short films. I'm an artist. One day I want to maybe be a comic book artist as well. And I love kind of hearing these stories about people who were just inspired when they were younger to then eventually go on and really actualize the things that they were inspired by. They created their own original characters and worlds. They had all this imagination. And for a while, maybe they thought, this is not something that is feasible. You can't really do this. And eventually you get to a point where you realize, wait, we could do this. We could, if we actually put our minds to it, we can create.
That's the thing. I think that's the part of what, if I would say anything to anybody, is like, don't give up. You know what I mean? Like I'm 44 and I've only been doing this now for a couple of years. Like I spent most of my adulthood not working in the thing that I dreamed I would work in when I was a kid, you know what I mean? But like it's never too late. Like you're never too old to try again, go for it. Why not? You know what I mean? What do you got to lose? And I, just don't, the thing that I think I learned being older now versus when I wanted to do it is, don't let everybody tell you what you can do or can't do. Don't let no's be the thing that stops you. Because dude, the world's full of no's. People can throw no's at any time they want. It's up to you what you do with that no. Right? Do you let it become data to learn to do what you want to do, or do you let it stop you? You know what I mean? That's the question.
Dude, for sure. When I was working on Superbook and I came in and I asked the director and I was like, hey, could I get a shot at writing an episode someday? And it was no. That's not gonna happen. and I went around the office like, hey, has anyone ever gotten a chance in the office here to write now? No, all the writers are in LA. I was like, oh. Okay, well, all right. Well, I'm going to talk to the story editor. Like, I'm just all right. Well, talk to the story. And and what I did was I was like, all right, I'm not going to outright ask him. I wrote a script that I was like, I worked really hard to write a spec. So I wrote a spec script for The Last Man on Earth, that show that was on Fox. Yeah, really funny. Man, I didn't like the later the first season was fantastic, and the later season's kind of like, but I wrote a spec script for that. And I went to the story editor and I was like, hey man, like I'm trying to become a writer and stuff. And I was like, would you just like take a look at this and just tell me what you think, And he looked at it and he was like, this is really good. He's like, you want to write for the show?
All right.
So then I went to the director and I was like, hey, yeah, the story editor said I can write for the show. So, So yeah, so don't take no. And man, and like, if you want to be in this field, yeah, you got to work really hard. Man, like I said, the novel that I wrote, it took me 5 years because I rewrote it from page one, rewrite, just threw everything out 3 times because I would write it and I was like, this kind of sucks. And I did that 3 times. And then I probably edited it like 12 times because I was like, my whole thing is like, I don't want to make something that I wouldn't be happy to watch or to read myself. And I'm like, yeah, like I look at my work, and that's something too that I would say to anybody out there that's thinking about getting in the industry: be like you really need to be able to evaluate yourself. You need to be able to self-critique and know, like, hey, how does my work stack up against what professional work is?
Yeah.
That's really important in this industry. And if you're not there, that's okay. Just work really, really freaking hard and just keep working and just keep doing and doing and doing. And that's, you know, that's pretty much it. If you just keep going, you're gonna get better.
And so you guys didn't take no at all. And you kept going, and now you're working on this show, Gabriel and the Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, first thing I wanted to ask was, I know we kind of touched on the initial inspiration before, which was, you know, you're doing what was it again? Like you're listening to a Bible podcast or something?
Yeah, called the Bible Project podcast. Tim Mackey, really good.
Right. And so you end up you take all this inspiration from these stories that I, like something that I find just from my initial research on this this show that I found really interesting was the fact that you're focusing on something that a mythology that I think is underutilized.
Yeah.
You always see things like Greek mythology for X, Y, and Z movie, comic book, TV show. You always see, you know, Egyptian mythology, but you never really see stuff delving into Hebrew mythology or ancient Sumerian mythology. And I think that's interesting because, I mean, first of all, so many people still in the world today are you know, they're Christian, they're Jewish, they're Muslim, and a lot of their lives revolve around these stories. And then you have things like going back older with the Sumerian, Mesopotamian stuff. That's like the oldest stories ever, right there. Yeah. That is the, you know, that is like the bedrock of modern day storytelling. All comes from that early written history. You know, stuff like the Epic of Gilgamesh and things like that.
Absolutely. I think that's part of, by design, this idea was like, oh man, like I think part of the idea of like, oh, I've stumbled onto something that is kind of unique. And some of the first feedback that I got from actual people in the industry was like, whoa, like this feels really fresh. And it only feels fresh because it's dealing with something that just isn't even though it's, I mean, this is old, like it is some of the oldest mythology out
stuff.
there. But it feels fresh because
no one's touching it.
No one's really touching really what is Mesopotamian, you know, Mesopotamian lore, legend, mythology. And you're right, like here's what's interesting is that the majority of the world's religions are actually, this is their ancient text. I mean, these are the stories that, you know, Muslim, Jewish, Christianity, you know, they all are pulling from these cultures' stories, right? They're you know, started or as these oral tales that were told, you know. But I mean, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of Noah, like these have so much common. There's a common denominator between those two tales, right? That is actually the world over. I mean, if you look, like you'll find that a similar, you know, flood myth over and over and over and over again. And so I think that where we started, David and I, like, I want to give David credit where credit's due. When I started, it was very biblical. Like it was like this, the whole thing was very like, I mean, it was set in earth, and it was like Noah, like literally Noah. And he was like old, you know what I mean? And the first thing David said, he was like, dude, we gotta make Noah young, like make him a kid, like make him the same age. You got Gabriel as a teen, like you've got this like, you know, 1600-year-old angel who's like 16 essentially. He's like, make Noah like 17. And I was like, that's actually a good idea, you know. That was the first thing. I was like, okay. You were like, make the three main characters that you got, make them all kind of teenagers. And I was like, I like this a lot. But then the next thing that happened was we kind of fell into this concept of like moving it away from the literal into the fantasy, while maintaining the mythology of the culture that it was based out of, right? So, and it wasn't hard when we started to think about, okay, like Chronicles of Narnia, right? Like this is a mythological tale, you know, but he's also, you know, it's a fictional fantasy story that's pulling from actual
mythology.
Real mythology, like Greek mythology, and then Arthurian legend. Like, so that's like C.S. Lewis's two major poles. Our inspirations are from, you know, Greek mythology and Arthurian legend. Lord of the, you know, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, you know, he's pulling from Norse and other like Northern European, you know, Celtic mythologies. So we were kind of like, well, wait a minute, hold on. No one, there's, you know, well, one like Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology, not only is that not really touched that much, nobody's doing a fantasy that's inspired by that. Like, definitely that's not been done. And so that's where we started to be like, okay, there really is potentially a truly untapped original fantasy world that's inspired by Mesopotamian mythology and lore. And that started to feel very cool and like very original. And so that's kind of where we were like, well, we can still tell these like beautiful themes and tales from Genesis and just have them set in a fantasy world inspired by the mythology that the cultures of those books would have believed in, right? So that's kind of where it all started to gel into something that was like, oh, this is something.
And something I've always been fascinated by is like that Joseph Campbell, you know, Hero of a Thousand Faces type thing, where it's like you really distill all of these mythologies into one thing. You get that hero's journey, the monomyth kind of plotted out. And I think by going and looking at the oldest texts, the oldest stories with heroes in them, you're kind of tapping into the source code of like what humans find like as stories that truly speak to them on a meaningful level. And I think just like using that as a base and building off of that, I think is a really great idea, going all the way back to that.
Yeah, I did. I've literally done a presentation. I'm going to do it again on the hero's journey. And I compare The Hobbit to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I go beat by beat about how this is how The Hobbit does this beat, this is how Raiders of the Lost Ark does this beat, to make the point that you can use this story structure is broad enough that you can do any kind of story with it. But it's familiar enough to where the audience is they're gonna resonate with it, because it's that ancient story structure that is just like, it's like in our DNA or something, you know? So no, I love that, man. I'm all about that. And I think next Tuesday night, November 19th. I don't know, I'm not sure when this is gonna air, but I think November 19th, I'm doing something. I forgot. I gotta check that again. But I think I'm gonna do this presentation again for somebody. I like a webinar or something like that. I think on our Discord maybe. But
Discord. Yeah, sir.
But okay, cool. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, the hero's journey, I mean, like the thing for me when I was like studying storytelling and I was studying film is I was trying to figure out, why do some stories really resonate with me and others don't? And why, and I kind of discovered Joseph Campbell, and I was like, oh, people that have figured out how to hit these beats really well in a way that you don't recognize them. That feels good. That feels really, really good in a story, where it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, like those moments, like it's really like, it's really amazing, right? When like a storyteller, filmmaker will be able to pull that off, and where it's like, where you don't feel like, oh, I already know what's going to happen, you know, and it's like still surprising. It's still surprising, but it's like, but it feels that fresh but familiar kind of thing. It's like, that's like that's like, you guys, read any Brandon Sanderson, or familiar with Brandon Sanderson's work?
No.
I'm not.
He is an amazing fantasy author. Everyone should check out Brandon Sanderson. Amazing fantasy author. And he has a free online class on YouTube. And he's done it several years. And I've gone through it like every single year. I've watched it so many times. And he always talks about like the I think it's the strange attractor, the fresh but familiar thing, which is like, that's what, when you find a movie, or, you know, a story that you're just like, wow, this feels just really, really great, and it was unexpected, but it wasn't completely unexpected, because something completely unexpected is usually like, I don't know what that was. You know, it's like there's something that's familiar about it. So no, that's I'm all about that, and I think it's so important to storytelling.
And it's important to understand those things, so that like when you do subvert expectations when you maybe do an inverse character arc. You know, those types of things are like, I just watched like the Penguin and just seeing a guy descend into madness over, you know, and I know like Frank Herbert
That show's
got a
really good.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It just ended
really good. Yeah,
it's ridiculously good. And Joseph Campbell had sent a angry letter to Frank Herbert, I heard, after he came out with Dune Messiah specifically, because a lot of people misunderstood the first Dune book, where he was trying to say Paul Atreides is kind of a bad guy. Actually, at the end, he becomes this cult leader and like takes over the universe. And then the sequel book, he was like, guys, just to make sure you know, he literally compares himself to Hitler. Like, he did all these terrible things. He killed billions of people. And Joseph Campbell was like, dude, you can't do that. Like, that was the perfect hero's journey. You just ruined it.
Dude, Dune messed me up. Like, I had not read the book. My wife had read it, and she was like, "You're gonna love this." Like, I watched the first one, and I was like, "This was pretty cool." Like, I'm pretty excited. And then we went and saw the second one in theaters, and she knew it was coming. I had no idea. So I got to the end of the movie, and I was like, "Is that it? What just happened?" He's taken over. He's become. I was like, "That's how it leads." Like, he's the bad guy. And she was like, "Yeah, he's the bad guy." I was like, "What?" I was blown. Yeah.
No, that's a perfect example of how somebody that knows how to do it, but then puts a twist on it, as opposed to, you know,
Game of Thrones.
as opposed to I was gonna say other stories out there. Other stories out there that just subvert expectations without any real meaning behind them.
Yeah, it's just for the shock value of it.
Just to do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, not that we should be talking about Game of Thrones.
But. Well, the one that comes to my mind is actually the Last Jedi.
Of course, yeah, that's like the one you think of when you think of subverting expectations.
Which is too bad, because, dude, like, was it Rian Johnson? Like, that guy is actually a great filmmaker, and I think a great storyteller. But man, I do not know what
happened there.
I do not know what happened there. Like,
when I was watching The Last Jedi, I remember watching The Last Jedi, and I remember just thinking, like, there were so many moments where, like, it's gonna be, it's gonna become great right now. I was like, no. Like, I mean, like, the last moment for me when like, you know, when Kylo Ren puts his hand out to Rey, and I was like, oh my gosh, she should take it. That's gonna be so interesting. We've never seen this before. We've never seen, like, the hero take the bad guys. I was like, oh man, do it. And then she doesn't. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that's the subversion that should have happened.
Right. Like, that would have been interesting. That exactly. I was like, oh, that would have been interesting.
But like, not to go too far out, but like, he did a movie called Looper. And
that was really good.
Great, like, really good. So I just had high expectations for his Star Wars, and
we talk about Star Wars quite a lot. Hence, you know, Galaxy,
quite a lot.
Galaxy of film.
Moss Eisley here.
Oh, yep. I've been to the Moss Eisley Cantina in Disneyland. That was awesome.
Dude, it's really cool. Yeah. But I think, you know, Disney or Star Wars is a good example in general, though, of something that was a pretty heavy influence, I think, as we were writing.
Oh, for sure.
Thinking about season 1, Star Wars played. We actually have a phrase of, like, how do we write our dialogue? And we basically have it's like, well, would they say that in Star Wars? Because if they would, if that phrase or line feels too modern for Star Wars, it's too modern for this. So, like, we use that as like a rule of thumb.
Star Wars dialogue has this very timeless feel to it.
Exactly. Yeah,
so that's a good litmus test.
So like what was it that I kept on just really
cool. You're like, we can't say the word cool.
We can't say cool. Like, different writers kept on trying to have Gabriel say the word cool, and I was like, no. He wouldn't say cool.
Did you guys come up with what did you guys end up using then?
We made up our, like, he has a word called shaba. He says shaba.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which is like, it's like some kind of Hebrewish.
Yeah. It's probably Yiddish or something.
Yeah.
It's like the slang. But we
hopefully he's not telling someone off, but anyway.
You did enough research.
We did.
A we've done a lot to try to make sure that a lot of the words and the language and all of that stuff has some root, right? Some kind of real. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, there's a
Well,
lot there for like history and like biblical nerds. Like they would really have a heyday
oh
with.
yeah. I mean, like everything in the show, like a lot of times, what we'll do when we're writing, especially if we're like we're working like on a new name, like we're like if I'm like writing something, I'm like, okay, like I need like a new monster name, and it needs to be based on this, this, and this, and I'll just go and look up the Hebrew words. I'll look up the English pronunciations of the Hebrew words, and then like I'll just take those and like cobble them together to make up a monster name. You
Yeah.
know. And it's like that's kind of like we do a lot of that.
Well, the Hebrew language is actually amazing. They they do a lot of inversions anyway, so they do a lot of mashup and inversions in their language already, and so certain words are actually just already the mashup of two other words to make this thing, or they'll invert it. So like they have like the word baraka, which means blessing, but inverted bakora means the first fruit of blessing, right? And so we actually have a tribe called the Bakora tribe, and they're the first. Bakora is kind of like the idea of like submitting the first, having the first fruits. And so we have this first tribe of Ara. They're called the Bakora tribe, and so we're always trying to play with those words and look for those fun kind of interchanges in that kind of ancient lexicon, you know.
So, as someone who one day wants to create their own comic book and my own universe, uh, obviously something that always I'm drawn to these things by just that character creation process. I wanted to ask you, like, what has that been like? You know, creating a character, really getting into their headspace, like learning who are they, how am I going to portray them, and how how our audience is going to come to know who they are.
That's a good
And
question. I think that David, who do you think has been the easiest for you to get into? Like, what character was it like easy to get your head into?
Um, I mean, honestly, I think that I think Kanoka and Knock are
Yeah,
probably the easiest for me.
yeah, I
Um,
think that feels right.
because they like Kanoka is this interesting character. Some inspiration from Yoda, some inspiration from Obi-Wan, some inspiration from some different Star Wars characters.
And then
Um,
Enoch.
what'd you say?
And then Enoch,
And
like
then Enoch, and then Enoch from the Bible, and so she was an interesting character, but honestly, well, and also there's another author that I love. I'm actually reading with my other son. I'm reading this book. It's called Lilith by George MacDonald, and there's a character in Lilith. I totally forgot. I read this book like years and years ago, and like I'm rereading with my son. I'm like, oh, I totally am like thinking of this character when I'm writing for Kanoka, and I didn't even realize it
yeah.
because it's another character that's very much like that. But
Kenobi is interesting because she's gone through, like, she started as a guy. So like when we first had Kanoka, like for a long time it was a male character, and then we switched it to a female character. And I actually think it added a ton. Like it felt really right when we decided to make that move.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
and
sometimes, yeah, like in character creation, like I've had characters in my head that I'm like, I've this is either two separate characters or one of them is male. And then like a couple years later, I'm like, it would actually be way better if I like merge these two characters together, completely taking the best qualities of both, or
for
like
sure.
changing their gender all of a sudden makes the whole dynamic of their story completely different and so much more meaningful. Just it's cool to be able to develop these things like that, you know.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Mhm.
for sure. And I think like I mean I think when it comes back to your question of like how to create those characters and like stuff. I mean, for me, I think it always starts off with the character's wound. Like what's their
Mm.
wound? And where do they like what's their want, what's their need?
Mhm.
And figuring out, and a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times it's interesting when the want and the need are in opposition.
Mhm.
Sometimes like they aren't, but you that's where like you play around. And for me, at least, I always like I like to just kind of like sit there and just like spitball. I'm like kind of a verbal processor too, so I love like talking to Jason, and we'll just like talk like, yeah, like what if like Knock was like this? And like, yeah, okay, like, oh, and then maybe, maybe like when he was a kid, something like this happened to him. Like, yeah, okay, and then and then that would mean that he's gonna really want to do this, and and it's just like you kind of start going, you kind of start, what gets you excited, when you think about like that character, and then figuring out, and then you kind of got to go into the process of like really figuring out what is their journey, and then how does that journey intersect with the plot of the story, because you can create, like, sometimes I've done this before, you create these really great characters, it's like, they don't have anything to do with this plot, with the plot of the story. And so you always have those, like, crossover and make sense and everything, and all has to like feel like, it meshes and stuff.
Sometimes it kind of it does happen organically, like, I mean, so we've got these, I think we've got these great characters, like particularly so we've got three main characters. The three primary characters of the show is Knock, who is basically this character that was supposed to be a cleric, which is like the priest class. And even that, he was kind of wasn't supposed to be that. Like, he was born in the lower classes of his tribe that were more like soldier class, and then he was selected from those ranks to become a cleric, which is like a higher class. But even in that, he ends up leaving that. He like walks away from it when some things happen. Trauma happens, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna give it away, David. Don't worry. Don't worry, I will give it away. But trauma, right? So trauma forces him, and this is all in his backstory. When we meet him, he's left that behind, and he's a giant hunter. Like, that's what he's claiming to be. He's like, I'm out there, I'm Knock of the Bakura, and I kill giants, And then in the first episode, he meets Namaya, who is this like princess from like the most powerful kingdom in the world, who worship the giants. Like, that's their thing. Like, they all like submit and serve the giants. And so when they meet in this village, she's trying to get the giant to, like, she's trying to present an offering to the giant, and Nox trying to kill it, and they're both kind of running into each other at the same time. And it just creates this great kind of
I really like that conflict that you have between these two characters, and I'm very curious to see how that kind of develops over time, and who's ends up on what side and who gets convinced, like,
absolutely
after I love that conflict.
That really that made those two characters pop. What's interesting, David set up a writer's room, and so we ended up having like 6-7 writers that came, and we cranked out like the first season in a week.
Outlines.
Like, we just like, it was really fun, and everybody was just like, pitching ideas. And we did start there. Like, we started on this board. This was cool because this was all new to me, so I got to experience it. But like, David had this big board. It was like every character's wound, and then like the journey of the season, and like, what are they all trying to, what are their wants? And the toughest nut to crack was actually Gabriel, which I found fascinating because he's the main character. But we had fleshed out these other characters so much that Gabriel started to feel a little like, it was like, well, what exactly is his personality? Like, Nock is sort of like this kind of sarcastic, funny character, kind of a Han Solo. And Namaya is sort of like feisty. She's a little bit Leia, but she's also a little bit like Tony Stark. Like, she's got this kind of like, she's a genius. She's like really, really sharp and really, really feisty. But it was like, but what exactly is Gabriel's personality? Like, we didn't want to have another just like boring hero, like just like and then at some point, I've told this before, so I know they know what I'm about to say, but at some point, the idea of what if Gabriel is this other world, he's a fish out of water character, right? So he is literally the inverse of like where you usually have the hero that starts here in like monotony, and then ascends to the divinity, right? He somehow crosses over into the special world, and we're actually doing the opposite. Gabriel starts in the special world, and then he descends into the mortal world, and he's a fish out of water.
I like that idea.
Yeah, and so he does that inversion of that kind of arc, but what's interesting about it is it was like, well, okay, what if I don't even remember who suggested it, but they were like, what if it was sort of like Buddy the Elf? Like, what if it was like what if his whole personality was sort of like naive, but like very endearing and very good natured and very honest. But like you could have him just reacting to everything because he's just literally from a different world, and he just trusts people. But it's infectious, like his optimism and his like. So there's a little bit of like Peter Pan. There's a little bit of like Buddy the Elf, and there's a little bit of like Goku in there, and it just has made him.
And
I mean, by the end, I was like, this is right. Gabriel is maybe one of the best characters now, and I wasn't sure he was going to be for a second.
I also got a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender
Yes.
vibes from kind of that trio. Like you've already established, like you have the two of them that are kind of like at each other's throats over their ideology over that, and it's like it kind of reminds me of Katara, and that like where her older brother is like very sexist towards her in the beginning. So they always have that conflict. Then you have Aang, which is kind of like Gabriel, where he's this
He's a fish out of water.
Fish out of water comes from this very high intellectual, spiritual plane of existence, coming down as this overpowered kind of spiritual being. And I like that dynamic.
You know what's
huge fan of Avatar.
Of course, yes.
Of course, absolutely, yes.
I will say though, I will say what's funny to me about the Avatar, because so many people have said, "Oh, this kind of feels like Avatar," is that I had never watched Avatar before. Before starting.
It was like, it hurts.
David
I know.
Stumbled into it.
Yeah. Once people started telling me this is like Avatar, I'm like, oh, I know I need to watch. Like one of those shows that's been on my list of I need to watch
Literally,
this.
people would be like to David, they'd be like, "Big fan of Avatar, aren't you?"
But even if this was like, I actually really do respect it. Like I mean, there's a frame in one of the trailers that I saw where it's like I think it's Gabriel looking like he's literally going Super Saiyan at some point. I like wearing your inspirations on your sleeve and being like, we love this stuff, and we want to like create more of those things that we grew up with.
For sure.
And there's a reason why that works and why it resonates with people,
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like Stranger Things was also like an inspiration for doing this, and like you're saying, wearing your inspirations on your sleeve. Stranger Things, like the creators, they obviously wear their inspirations on their sleeves, right?
Yes.
And it's like, but it's cool because you can tell they really love it, and like we hope people when like they say it, like they can tell we really love this, we really love these characters and the style and the show.
There's a line between rip off and homage, right? And I think it is love. It is how much do I actually care about this source material? Am I just trying to rip it off? No, man. It's like I truly love Dragon Ball. Like I just finished watching it with my boys. Like we watched the whole thing from like episode 1 of Dragon Ball Z all the way through Dragon Ball Super. Like we this year we watched the whole thing, and they are like the biggest Dragon Ball fans.
The new show is out, right?
I know. Yeah, we started watching Daima, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Some people. I was always a big fan of the American voice actors, so I never watched the subtitled versions. So they were a little like, we were trying to watch it. They were like, why is it not in English?
That is coming soon. I know that they got Stephanie Nadolny to come back to voice Kid Goku.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know. I think they just did like a film screening of like the first like 4 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think that's coming out soon. Yeah.
Like the animation is.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it looks, no, it really feels, I've been watching it. It really feels like Toriyama was getting very nostalgic, It's like I want to go back to those early Dragon Ball days.
Dragon Ball, my kids are at the theater right now watching the first, 3 episodes.
Oh, really?
There you go. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Exactly what I was talking about. Yeah.
We should go do that when we're in Nashville.
They literally were like, they were helping me with my son, and I said we were over there moving stuff, and they're like, "We gotta go. We've already got tickets. We have to get to the movies." Like, what movie are you just going to see? Dragon Ball. I was like, what the heck? The first couple episodes of the new one. I was like, oh man.
I kind of wish that they had put this much effort in the quality in Super. Like,
yes,
so I wish Super looked this good. Super is good.
They really rushed out Super, unfortunately. They didn't. I mean, Toriyama was also very much like he would kind of write out like story notes like on a napkin and like would hand it over to Toei, and then and they would kind of flesh out the story and kind of come up with random stuff from there. This was very much they had Toriyama come in, and he was like really fleshing it out, really writing out everything, really doing all of the character design work, and just I have so much respect for that man, and it really did hit me hard when he passed away earlier this year. Yeah, that was a huge hit to the whole community. Everybody's like inspired by Dragon Ball at this point, you know. Like it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember, I've been following the manga since, I don't know, 20 years. I don't know, you know, and I remember reading that last chapter that he, and just, you know, Piccolo saying goodbye. And it was like, man, it felt like his goodbye, you know?
Yeah. And,
I want to take you guys back for a second and, you know, imagine yourself, you know, it's 2009 and Dragon Ball Evolution is about to come out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember that. Dude, I saw that in theaters.
It's just the hope, you know, just like, and then that feeling when you get into that theater and you're just like,
oh no.
This might be the worst film I've ever seen ever in my life.
That was unbelievably bad. Oh my gosh.
I've tried to go back and watch it like a few times, and I'm just like, no, it's bad. It is bad.
Yeah,
it is as bad as I remembered.
I would need to be very intoxicated to watch that movie again.
Which one is worse, Dragon Ball Evolution or the M. Night Shyamalan Avatar movie?
Dragon Ball Evolution, by far. It's not even. I don't even have to blink.
Okay. Like, I had to ask real quick.
Avatar, like somehow Avatar hurt more. Like, I mean, Evolution is way worse for sure. Like, it's just bad. But Avatar, like, I don't know that I was always suspicious of the Dragon Ball movie. I was like, they're not gonna be able to pull this off. But I actually kind of thought, I was like, M. Night Shyamalan doing Avatar, like this could be great, and it wasn't, and that hurt.
Yeah, I think what hurts harder is that like you could tell they tried a little bit harder with Avatar. Like they tried to capture that aesthetic and that feel, and they did stick to the story for the most part. It was just the execution just kind of fell apart. Or with Dragon Ball Evolution, they didn't even try. They were like, he's in high school.
Felt like a cash grab. It felt like made by people who have never watched Dragon Ball.
I mean, like, have you guys ever seen like those 90s Marvel movies that are just like,
oh my god,
made to keep the licensing, you know, like literally they're never gonna that's what that felt like. Awful.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the development of the characters on like a personal level, but like what was it like designing the characters, like literally, like because obviously you have a lot of things, like because this isn't just a comic book, this is also an animation. You have to keep in mind, you know, how complicated, how complex is this character design going to be, because you need animators to then move these characters around. This was going like bringing up you brought up Dragon Ball Super earlier. That was a problem with their key, like their animation supervisor kind of had character designs for Goku and everybody that were very angular and blocky, a lot of shading and stuff like that. So the animators had a much harder time actually animating these character designs. And you know, I always find that very fascinating with this process. You know, what was it like, you know, putting that together?
It was quite the process. Like, I mean, the primary characters went through, they've gone through a number of redesigns over and over and over again.
Probably dozens. Probably dozens.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And luckily, Al, you know, was a huge help on that. Like,
I was gonna say, in the beginning, literally, I was like, we can't do this.
Yeah.
What? And I was like, we can't do this. I said, can you imagine having to draw that for like 1,000 frames? We can't do this.
Yeah.
You know.
So luckily, I was there, like, kind of looking at some of those early designs and being like, it's not gonna work. Like, we could do it, but like, no, like it's gonna cost. Like, we wouldn't be able to do it at budget, you know. And so beginning to look and try to figure out, how do you pull things back? How do I articulate, you know, because coming from, you know, most of my experience was really from comics, right? Like, it was a long time ago, but like you could be pretty detailed, right? Like high render, right, in comics. And so trying to translate some of those ideas and simplify that down into, you know, the core elements. You know, how do you that's what I think I realized, that process is about stripping away as far possible as you can, down to the like essence without losing any of the essence, right? You want
But
to keep.
I would say, we came to a pretty good happy medium because, we kept looking at stuff like Castlevania,
Mhm.
and we started, and even, Jason was like, I know Dragon Ball is a little less detailed than us, but we would look at Dragon Ball and we'd look at what some of the bigger, more popular shows are doing and say, as long as this is the maximum we go to,
Yeah.
we should be okay. And being as one of our studios actually worked on Castlevania, we kind of have that as our guide. Like, we can get this detail, but we shouldn't really push past.
Yeah.
And they
That's
haven't
a
complained.
Tiger
yet,
Animation,
so,
right? Is that the
Yeah.
studio you guys work with? Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, and they haven't complained about it. Hey, hopefully they're not listening to this podcast, but they haven't complained about it yet. So,
Fingers
I
crossed.
mean,
Yeah.
no, they definitely had a few
Fingers
things,
crossed.
like, because we have these halos, right, that the
Mhm.
Celestials have, and so that was one thing that they were like, "Are these guys going to have halos all the time?"
Do we have to
Yeah.
animate those
well,
all
they
the
did
time?
what was really cool is they did a CG Halo, but it
Mm.
kind of has this 2D feel to it, so that simplified it
Hmm.
for them because originally it was kind of drawn and stuff the way we had it, and they came up with the CG version of it, and it looks pretty cool.
Looks good, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's why they never brought back Perfect Cell in Dragon Ball Z, because of all the little like polka dots all over him. I don't know what Toriyama was thinking when he designed that character.
Oh.
He
Well,
was
he was
like, the
thinking
animators
was-
are gonna hate me, but I'm
I
doing
was gonna say,
this.
when all of his animators ended up killing themselves, he was like, "Wait a minute, maybe this wasn't such a good idea."
That would have been some of the conversations. I'd point to something like Cell. I'd be like, "Eh?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, that's the exception, man, not the rule." He's like, "I
Yeah.
noticed they only had one bad guy that looked like that."
What you do is you research what happened to the key animators on this character, and then you see them all in the mental wards, strapped up, and you're like, yeah, well, that's because they never saw their kids for 3 years. That's why. So, or their wife.
Now, I know you're also planning on having a manga coincide with this as well, right?
Yes, yeah, we are.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I know your fans won't be able to see it, but we gotta.
Well, you might not be able to see it either.
Just turn
Blurred out.
Yeah.
Legal reasons.
Word.
It's the Zoom blur.
Cool.
The Zoom blur.
Yeah, it's Zoom blur.
Crowd blur is covering it, but
It is real.
very
Um,
cool.
Does
Yeah, no.
exist.
Dude,
David, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say that we are gonna be putting out some pages soon. I think if you go on our Discord, actually you can see them now. So
Oh, cool.
if you go to our Discord, we put out like a few pages from the beginning and the cover. So Jason, but yeah, you can talk more about the manga process.
Yeah, no, I think that what we pretty early on we were like, we need to have a manga with this, right? Because we just know that that's part of the, that we really wanted to do this as kind of follow the model as best we could of what, a real anime is doing. We're like, look, we're an anime inspired show. Let's be inspired by the model that a lot of anime follows. And they, in a perfect world, we would have had the manga out, well before, last year.
Mhm.
But at this point, we're looking like it's going to probably come out alongside of the first episode, and then the manga will continue to go while we go back and finish working on the first season, and we'll release the manga over the course of the next
Oh, cool.
year.
Okay.
And so we yeah, I mean, right now, like what we're about to release is a prequel.
Ooh, okay.
It's gonna be like a 32-page prequel plus like 8-page preview of what the actual series will look like.
It's like a special edition. There's some art pages in there and things.
Behind the scenes. So that's about to come out.
It was kind of like it was kind of this weird thing where we started like okay, we're like, all right, how should we start the manga? And it was like, well, like, because it's much simpler process, it's not like it's not nearly the cost of doing animation. Like, let's start with like a cool kind of like story, like you know, I'm like a really big fan again of like I mentioned like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. And one of the reasons why I love it is just because Indiana Jones is such a great character. He's such a fun character to watch. You know, like he, you know, like he gets in these situations and he just it's just great. It's just like fun watching. It's kind of like Sherlock Holmes, you know? Like it's just fun to watch those characters just be those characters. And so I was like, you know, our main series is gonna have these characters. They're gonna grow. They're gonna change. They're gonna go on that hero's journey. But it's been really fun to do like a prequel where you just get to see somebody being a badass, like, and you get to see somebody in their element. And so I was like, all right. So we like, you know, worked to like, all right. So where we do this stuff. So we found a story in the lore. Like we've written, myself with another couple other writers. I put together 100. We're at 108 pages, like 108 pages, series Bible that has like the history of the world and all this kind of stuff. As we kind of pick this moment, like, oh, this would be really cool. It's like a short little moment. And so that's where the first manga chapter is gonna start, and you get to see like this cool moment in history, like hundreds of years before the events that the series picks up with. And So yeah, it's been a really fun process. And then, like Jason was saying, we're working with a manga artist I think he's in the Philippines. I think he's in the and he's I'm pretty sure he's in the Philippines. We work with people in Singapore, Philippines, South Korea, Poland, like all over the place. But he's working right now on the actual series that will follow like the main series in like what I kind of feel like is kind of like the typical kind of manga to actual TV series format, which is the manga's usually expanded, usually get more, you know, and it's kind of like because you can kind of do that, you know, like you can kind of spend a little more time places, you know, like with the TV series, man, everything is like so edited, so tight, everything has to be super duper tight. And With the manga, you can kind of like, you know, spend a little bit more time in some of these places, some of these stories, and you can even explore some like side stories that you don't really have time to do in the main series. So we're working on that right now as well, and those pages we're gonna start releasing some pages for that as well, probably in the next, I don't know, they give me like maybe 2-3 months, something like that. Like we're working on right now, and the idea, like Jason was saying, is that we have this as like an ongoing release as we continue to work on the series. So
And Jason, so you were just holding up a book that you have printed out. So how much is in that?
Yeah, so this was something we did. This was something
is that like a mock-up or?
Yeah, this is something we did as a preview for it was a GalaxyCon exclusive.
Oh right. Yes, so Max told me about that actually.
Yeah, so this was like 8 pages from the middle of the episode. Basically, it's like the cover is like the moment that Gabriel has to go against the giant that's this Nephilim that has invaded the paradise realm that he guards. And so it's just kind of it's introducing Gabriel. We just kind of took a section of the episode that we're like, what would be a great like just right into the action and introduces Gabriel. And so yeah, that's what those pages were. And so they're actually included in the prequel that we're putting out. So yeah, they're really good. And the artist, his name is Gio Art
Batlow. Man,
Batlow, I think.
He always just
really good. He was really good, really good. And then I did the cover, so that's cool. That was fun.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Jason did the cover for the other one too. Yeah, Gio Batlow. Yeah, he always just goes by Gio, so I had to like look up what was his last name again. But yeah, it's been a really fun process. I mean, like we as like making this series, like our goal is really to create content and to build the brand and build the franchise, because you know, like what we really want to do is explore all these worlds. Like we've got, so like I mentioned, we have a 108-page series Bible. I've outlined the first 5 seasons on what where the show's going to go and everything. And I'm really excited to get to the later seasons. We've got some really crazy things planned, you know. Like I said, it's one of those things where I try to write stories that would excite me and that I would be excited to see. So I'm always thinking like, well, would I actually be excited to see this? And if I'm not, like, okay, what could I do here that would actually be cool? Would it actually be exciting? So we got some really cool stuff planned, and you know, it's one of those things with TV shows, right? Where we got our first season coming, And you know, we hope that fans show up so we can do that second one, and then we can do the third one, and we can, you know, we can keep going. So, but it's always it's always, you don't know how it's gonna go. So
Yeah. So I see. So you guys obviously got picked up by Angel Studios. What was it like getting picked up by them? And like, yeah, was there any? Were you guys creatively like allowed to do like whatever you wanted, or was there any stipulations about like what you can and can't do? I know that Angel Studios is also like they focus on like kind of Christian, like family focused stuff. Uh, and did your story that kind of align with the types of things that they were okay with putting on there? I know at some point there was like from what I understood, there was like a voting thing that happened to see if it would get greenlit. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people were able to even give in like their thoughts and opinions on that. Like, so what was that all like?
Yeah, so Angel is a really unique model, because anybody can go to Angel Studios website and you can submit your project to their guild, and they have thousands of submissions go up every year. They have a lot, and so you submit your project, and as long as you meet the criteria, and like they have specific criteria, like, you know, they should be like, I don't know, so many minutes, and it should be like, you know, this, like, you know, should be like a finished, like, not creative criteria really, but they have like, it's mostly like specifics, like it should be this long, and it should be, you know, like this quality of, you know, material, whatever. And so, you know, we threw our animatic, because it just, it like, we didn't have the money to actually make any final animation.
Right.
And so what they want, like what they want in that guild, is they want to see like at least like 5 minutes of what the thing's going to be. And so we threw that into the guild, and people vote on it. And the year that we got that we passed, we got approved for their guild process. There were several thousand submissions, and only 12 shows, I think, actually got approved by the crowd. And so Angel doesn't like, they don't. So we have complete creative control. But I mean, like, I will say that, like, you know, you know, I don't know. Like, we definitely like want the show to be like inspiring and not gratuitous. I mean, like, I'll tell you, like, right now, like, you know, we don't have gratuitous things in our show. Like, there's violence, there's like monsters and get their heads chopped off and stuff. But it's not like we're not doing gratuitous stuff. There's not going to be sex in our show. There's not going to be that kind of stuff.
Would be romance.
There is, well, yeah, there might be some romance. But you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, we have creative control. But you know, I think that our values are, you know, align, where like we both want to create content that's uplifting, that's hopeful, that's inspiring, that's like good content that, you know, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I think Angel, you know, because they came out of the gate with The Chosen, they kind of, people are like, oh, they do Christian content. They actually, like, they don't say that themselves. They actually are just like, we want to create positive content that basically, they have a saying, like the content that like brings light,
amplifies
light, which is
amplify light. Like, so they kind of keep it in this vague. I mean, obviously they're you know, they're not, I don't think they are, and they aren't trying to trick anybody to make anybody think like they aren't Christian. I mean, they obviously are Christian in their values and as a company, but they're definitely putting out like some of the content that, like, I would say like Sound of Freedom isn't really Christian as much as it is, you know, whatever else you want to say it is, because it's a lot of different things. But you know, I didn't find it to be particularly Christian. And I think that that's exactly where they want to live. They want to live in a space of like, you know, just telling really good stories that have some kind of faith, maybe faith adjacent, maybe is a good way to put it, right? Like that's kind of where they.
I'll tell you, I really wish that when I was a kid growing up in church, we had some badass anime that, like, you know, it's like, all right, like VeggieTales is cool. Max is a huge fan of VeggieTales. He's not here on this episode today, but he loves VeggieTales. But you know, give me an angel cutting a demon's head off.
You know, that would be really cool. Like, and I'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to be a part of this.
I think if you're looking for, cutting the head off of a Nephilim, that I think we might be able to deliver on that.
Yes.
Dude, no, 100%. I mean, I would say 100%, man. I will say like that. One of the reasons why we decided on this particular story was because we kind of looked around and we're like, you know what? Like nobody's doing anything in the like at the teen, like in the teen space. Cause like, you know, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to target like the 13 and up kind of audience. And I mean, like, I think that some younger kids could definitely watch. Depends on, you know, like, their parents and all kind of stuff. But we wanted to target that because all I see right now is just like it's either faith-based content that is 12 and under or it's adult stuff. But nobody's trying to do anything cool. And at the same time, like I say faith-based, and because you know we're Christians, but we definitely are not making this for a Christian audience specifically, like at all. Like we're making this to be accessible to anybody, which is why we took the fantasy route, which is why we're like, I would say we sit somewhere between Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings, which I would say anybody can enjoy. It doesn't matter what faith you are.
Yeah, exactly. It reflects, like for sure, our show reflects our worldview. It reflects our values. It reflects the values that we believe in, and honestly, it reflects the values of the source material that we thought was so beautiful to make to base our show off of. Right? Like I looked at these ancient texts, and I went, there should be an anime based on this. You know what I mean? Like, and so it reflects that source material. I think in the most creative and best way it can. But I think that I think that we want to have something that I don't know. So if you came from that, there was a really cool comic book series called Archangels back in the late 90s that was done by a Christian, but I mean it was cool. It was like so cool. It was like angels cutting the heads off of demons, right? Like, and it was just so inspirational to me, and it was the only thing I ever saw that reflected my worldview and the things that I was like, oh, you know what, like this is what I believe, and here's this really cool piece of media that's reflecting that back to me. I don't feel crazy. I don't feel alone in the things that I believe in. I think that like the Avatar: The Last Airbender does it too. It reflects the worldview of the source material that the guys who created it obviously were passionate about. They obviously had a passion for like Buddhist ideology, because it's ripe with it. I mean, it's just every other episode is bringing some kind of ancient Buddhist ideology. And I'm not saying that from a negative point. I think it's beautiful. And so I think that what we wanted to do was do something similar. Like, let's create, but because no one's watching Avatar and no one's walking away being like, I felt like I was preached to about Buddhism.
Right. Yeah.
No, you watched a really cool show. You didn't even recognize that they were teaching you Buddhist ideology, right? Like that's what I think we want to do. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Like we don't want, we're not preaching. The show's not going to preach. I hate preachy stuff on both sides, on any side. Like, I don't want to be preached at. I want to be entertained. I want to be entertained. I want to have a great emotional story. You know, it's like Miyazaki. If you watch any documentaries or interviews with him from Studio Ghibli, he always talks about how this is an emotional medium. Like film and TV is an emotional medium. It's not an intellectual one. It's the best experience you can have is when you emotionally connect with the story, with the characters. And whenever you start preaching, you immediately throw up that intellectual part of the brain, and people start saying, I don't like that. Like nobody likes being told what to do, especially by their entertainment, especially, it's like, nobody likes being told what to do. You want a good story. You want to enjoy. You want to go on a journey. You want to go on a fun adventure. And so that's what the show's is going to be, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation. I want to know when is this all coming out? Is there an official release date yet for the show?
So we are finishing the pilot episode right now, and the pilot will be out. We're still working on an exact date, sometime end of January, beginning of February. And then the rest of the season, we're working on it. The rest of the season doesn't have a date yet, but I will say that if you watch that pilot, and that will support us, and that will help us get the rest of the season moving even faster.
Absolutely.
Brandon, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Oh boy, I get to talk. All right.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I wanted to ask this question to the three of you guys. Having so much different levels of experience when it comes to animation, I just wanted to know what you guys. I wanted to hear you guys' opinion on what animation offers to audiences that not many people would get to, like it wouldn't be able to come across through when if it was like in a live action version. So I wanted to kind of hear each of your guys' opinions on that.
Well, I'll say I come from both backgrounds. I come from 3D and 2D. I've done both. And I just think that 2D is like moving art, right? I mean, it's literally art. You can see the craftsmanship. You can see the artist's hand in it. Even though now we're what we call paperless animation, so we don't use paper like we did back in the day, and but you can still see the artist's hands in it, the way they draw. You can still see it, and I think that I don't think I'm exactly answering your question, but I think what I'm telling you, this is what I value about it. I just think it's like moving pieces of, well, it is moving pieces of art. Every frame is a piece of art, and every frame has someone's hand going into it. I mean, CG is beautiful, right? Character designs are beautiful and all those things, but there's something about CG where it's kind of uh what's the correct word I want to say? It's like it's just so clean, it's just so but there's another word. It's escaping me right now.
There's like a distance between the artist and the art.
It's like too polished, I guess.
Yeah,
it's not as analog or practical.
Right. And there's like a almost the word's almost like sanitized. You know what I mean? It's like it's not really sanitized, because now my CG friends are all gonna bomb me with like, what do you say? But
just throwing shade at them.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to, but it's just that's the way I feel about it when I look at it. I think that, and also you can do things in animation, right, that you can't do in live. I mean, in live action necessarily, but nowadays with the amount of CG that's in live action, it's basically like animation. I mean, you can do, if we go back to Star Wars, there was things you couldn't really do when they were filming Star Wars live action that we can now do in animation. But now how it's all kind of merged. I mean, there's so much animation in what you watch as live action that they can pretty much now, squash and stretch. They can do all of those kind of things that you couldn't do, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So it's kind of all merged now. But if I was to look at CG animation versus 2D animation, I just think 2D, even though again we're not using paper anymore, you can see the artist's hand in it. I'm sure these guys have, things that they would say too, but
yeah. I mean, like for me, what I love about animation is it's the same thing that I love about fairy tales. And it's that in a fairy tale or an animation, it's further away from reality. And the further that you get from reality in storytelling, a lot of times the more that you let your guard down and you can allow that story to kind of get into your brain, get into your consciousness. It's one of those things where you can kind of do crazy things that you could do with CG, but they would just kind of look silly. But in animation, it looks beautiful. And you can do these things. I mean, honestly, like a lot of like there's a lot of animated films where it's just like, if you really did that in CG and tried to make it look live action, it would just look kind of dumb. And I think we've all seen some instances where they've tried to do that. Where they've tried to take like animation and turn it into live action. It's like, it's kind of looks stupid. Like, but in animation, it looks really beautiful and amazing. But I think I'm trying to remember the quote. Miyazaki said in an interview, he was talking about this, and he was talking about how animation kind of takes away the rough edges of reality and allows you to kind of go into a dream for a little bit and to kind of dream and to kind of be in another world that's separated from reality to give you kind of a break from reality. And I really like that. I really like that it allows you to kind of it's a little bit of an escape from reality, and there's something soft about it compared to reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I think for me, it's as simple as it is make believe made real. Like it is imagination in its purest form brought to life. Like that's what animation feels like. It is like if you can take the imagination of someone and put it out, like that's animation, and that's that I love it. It's always felt like that to me.
Yeah, I actually really like that Miyazaki quote. That's probably like a great explanation to how like I would probably see animation too. Is just this, yeah, just this way of just escapism practically. Like, I mean, I know I started really getting into anime this year, so I've watched shows like Death Note and Full Metal Alchemist, you know, like those kind of shows. And yeah, I really appreciated animation throughout all the kind of years, like especially like stop motion animation and even 2D animation. Like I just feel like it's like not given like enough respect for, like, you know, despite all this like content that's being put out. Like it just, you never really truly like understand like the time and effort that gets put into like crafting like animation and like that. So like it's just a great like just quote to go off of. Another question. I have so many questions that you guys already answered. It's hard for me to come up with them. Let's go. You know what? I got a question for David specifically here because I know you've been involved, you know, storytelling and the writing process. You've been part of it so much of your career. I just wanted to know, like, and you've talked about this earlier on too. I just wanted to know any other kind of inspirations that you've had over the years of like any like TVs or movies or anything that really made you inspired to venture into this career path down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think so this is gonna sound maybe a little strange. The first book that I ever read on my own, I was a horrible student, by the way. Like in like high school and stuff, and like you know like middle school and all that kind of like grade school, I was a horrible student. I never read any books, but the first book I ever read was George Orwell's 1984,
Oh,
which was
okay.
a weird choice in the 10th grade, right? Um, and it just that story just it captivated me. I read the last 100 pages in like one sitting, and I had never read a book. I had just didn't read books because I was just like watching cartoons all the time and everything. But that really struck me in the power of storytelling. And I will say, like, one of the things that's really influenced me a lot honestly has been life experience. Like I've read a lot of great books. I mean, like I love Lord of the Rings. I love Chronicles of Narnia. I love George MacDonald, all of his books. I love Brandon Sanderson. His works are amazing. I read a lot of books. And film wise, I mean, like you know, I could go on. You know, Miyazaki, Spielberg. I love what Christopher Nolan. His movies. I mean, there's so many that are so amazing, so great. But one thing for me, at least, that really helped me was like I said, like for a while, I was just like kind of like wandering, and I spent like several years like in Colorado. I was working at like this tiny little ministry as a breakfast cook. I was making breakfast for about 150 people every day, and it was really good for me to have lived experience in different things. Like I've been a cook, I've worked landscaping, I've worked tech support at Verizon, I've done sales at Verizon, I've worked at Radio Shack, I worked at Best Buy, I worked at McDonald's. When I was in Colorado, was I was literally like cutting trails and leading hikes, and I learned to snowboard and rock climb and mountain bike. And honestly, all of those things I've taken into my work, and I've like taken from them. And like, for me at least, if there's any aspiring writers out there listening to this, take notes throughout your life. Because like I have like, now I have my phone, but I would just take notes. I would take notes on conversations that I would have with people, like funny, oh, that was really funny. Or like interesting situations, or scary things. And but just like getting in the habit of taking notes throughout life, and just and it's just like it kind of gets your brain going to like be thinking like story wise, and to be churning and imagining what could be. Like I'd be out on a hike, and I would just be imagining, some story out on the hike, or come to a peak or something like that, or like just working in the kitchen, and thinking of different things. But it really actually helped to have those different experiences. And then I lived on a farm for a year too, which was super fun. Taking care of cows, and baling hay, and taking care of blueberry bushes, which was like super different, but it was really really fascinating. They thought it was
Nice.
crazy. Yeah, it was like they like the cows got out of they would like there was like a couple times the cows got out in the middle of the night, and it would be like one time it was like rain, it was like a thunderstorm, and they were like, come on, get up, we got to get the cows, like they broke into like the neighbors like farm, got to wrangle them back. And I was like, this is awesome, like I'm like, I'm out in the rain, it's thunderstorm, and I'm like wrangling the cows, and they were like, you are crazy. And I was like, no, this is really cool. Like I was working at Radio Shack before this. This is way more interesting. And I think just getting out and having experiences, having adventures of your own. Because when you have adventures of your own, then when you're writing adventures, like what it's like. You know what it's like to be in a scary situation. I've been in a few scary situations. And you know what that's like, and then you can write those even better. I'm not saying go and like put yourself in crazy.
In that experience, so you can write about it.
Don't go and put yourself
or be dead. One of the two.
In death-defying situations. I've had a couple of those that I would not do that again. But I would say, get out and hike, and push your, get out and do something, push yourself. Definitely, like I told my students when I was teaching that for me at least, I did not know what I was capable of doing until when I was like, dude, when I moved to Colorado, I was 115 pounds, like nothing, like, like I was so tiny. And they're like, all right, like we're gonna go on this 7-mile hike today. And I was like, oh, okay. And I got wrecked. I was just and I was so, and like in 3 months, I gained 20 pounds of like muscle, because like I had to. And there were so many times where I got pushed to like my limit. Like I was like, I can't go any farther. And then I realized I could. And it was just like, it is those kind of things have even helped in my writing. Like when I was writing my novel, I was like, I have 2 young kids, I have a full-time job, I am in grad school, and I have to write this book. And so like, all right, when can I do this? I have to wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and I have to write. And I was like, no matter what, I got to wake up at, not no matter what, but pretty much, like whatever I can do to do it, I have to get up and I have to do this. And like, I knew that I could do it. I was like, I know it's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable, but like, I'm just going to do it every day. And I'm going to write 15 minutes or an hour or however long I get.
Yeah. You've just described like multiple little mini heroes journeys that you could then extrapolate and abstract these things. Like instead of writing a book, it's we're fighting a evil giant. Like you just, but it's the same feeling, right? Even though you change those variables out, it's the same feeling of overcoming great obstacles.
No, that's
becoming getting that reward, but at the end of it, and yeah, a lot of I see what you're saying there about writing and gaining from your own personal experience and putting that into your work. Yeah,
that's exactly right. 100%, man. Yeah.
No, yeah, and I've shared those sentiments too. Like sometimes, like I'll just be in my room or something, or I'm watching a movie, and my brain just like clicks to something like, I could like pull off like an alternate version of like what's happening on that screen. So like, yeah, like I share like the same exact like creative mindset sometimes, but yeah, I like that life experience stuff a lot. I should actually take that into consideration in my life. I want to hear from Al now. I want to hear from Albert a little bit here, because you talked about it a little bit in this interview. Working at Disney, some of like, probably some of the biggest movies Disney's ever made, like Beauty and the Beast, Tarzan, Pocahontas, like you said, just to name a few. So I was just curious to know like how much Disney has kind of helped you or kind of helped shape your career path. And I also want to know what specific roles you were assigned while you were making a lot of those movies too.
Yeah. So I was going to say something fun. Disney shaped my career path by laying off all us 2D artists, so I had to become a 3D artist.
Yeah.
Before there was 2D came back to life, but
sure, yep.
so it shaped me that way. But no, I mean, it's Disney's a cool place, right? But what made it cool was the people, working there. And so just to give a little context, we all, I'd say all, but a lot of us still talk, weekly. We have our own private Facebook group for just Florida, because before I was saying Florida and California, we have a group that's all alumni from Disney Animation, and so that's Florida and California. But we have a Florida alumni group that's just if you worked in Florida, and people still talk with each other and communicate. And one of the greatest things I ever heard was from an animator there that had been an animator for a long time, and he said, we're always learning. So we never finished school, because we were doing a tour, and I forgot who I was showing. I was showing someone around, and they had a kid, and their kid asked him, like, he's like, "Oh, so what grade are you in, or whatever?" And the kid told him, and he's like, "Yeah, but I hate school." And he said, "Well, kid," or well, whatever the kid's name was, you're always in school. It's like every day you're learning something new. And every day you're learning something and how to do something new or something better or something different. And it was definitely challenging being there, because you would get thrown into situations that you had to create ways to solve them. And so you're always using your mind on how to solve them. Like I was in a area where we fixed a lot of stuff. So the department was called Animation Check, but then we also would help out with other people in another department called Final Check, and so we would do stuff there as well. So Animation Check was kind of like this high. We used to call it was a bridge. It was a bridge between the traditional hand drawn drawings and getting everything digitized, so that, because at that point they weren't doing cell painting anymore, everything was being digitally painted. And Disney had this system called caps, and so everything was painted in this caps program, their proprietary moving Photoshop, for lack of a better word. And so a lot of times where I was at, so like a compositor's job is to figure out how to layer everything, how to add the special effects in there so that the effects work right. And then, but we had the system early, this is back in, it had to be like 94, 95. And this system that was really designed to replace the traditional 2D pipeline and camera. And so they didn't really think about things like taking a 2D piece of drawing and then using that, like you can do it now in After Effects, but back then you had to use that 2D drawing. Like, so if a raindrop had come down and hit the water, we were using that before there was After Effects. We figured out how to use that to drive ripples across water. And I remember having a conversation with one of my supervisors, and they're like, "It can't do it." And I said, "No, it can do it. I've had so many hours in this system. I know this system can do it." And they were like, "No, it can't. It's not even designed to do that." Well, I figured out how to do it, and I had it working. And those were the kind of challenges that we were faced with all the time. But because we were a bridge, not only do we have to figure out the computer side of stuff, but we had to fix drawings too, because a lot of times what happens is a set of drawings will come in, and when you look at it, you see, oh, this isn't working, or this character's not grabbing this, or this character's not walking through this door properly, or a character. A lot of times, what happens is a character is supposed to exit screen, but because either layout or somebody else didn't draw the draw to lines properly, or the directors widened the shot after it had already been animated. They decided, you know what, let's go wider on this when there's not enough drawing. And so we would animate these characters off screen. So I had to do traditional hand drawing, animating. Don't tell any of the other animators because they wouldn't like that. But I had to do that kind of stuff to fix these shots.
Would you also do like having to fix like if a character was like off model for a few frames, or was it like by the time it would get to you would things like that be like?
Yeah, we don't. I mean, if Jason was here, every frame is not a perfect piece of art.
Right,
because we don't have time. He's there because we don't have time for that. We can't make every single frame. Like the key poses, we try to hit those as well as possible. But some of the in-betweens, and again, other Disney artists would argue, no, we tried to make them all perfect. And they do try to make them all perfect. But there are times that there's just some weird drawings that are in there, but they go by so fast that they're 1/24th of a second. In our case, it's 1/30th because we're doing 30 frames per second. But we're actually animating on 24 frames per second, but it's going to be broadcast at 30 frames. But when you're in the theater, film is projected at 24 frames per second. Of course, we don't use film anymore. Everything's digital, so this is all a moot point. But back in the day, it was 24 frames a second. So 1/24th of a second, you're not going to see it. It just goes by so quickly.
Well, we like one of the things that like I was given notes to the overseas studio to Tiger, and I was doing drawovers, and they were like, too many drawovers. Like we can't. They were like, we can't fix every single frame. They're like, you're just like some of these in betweens just aren't going to be. It just is what it is. Like and I like kind of was like, ow, and he was like, yeah, no, they're right. Like, they're not gonna be able to. He's like, we got to just focus on the keys. I was like, okay.
Richard Williams was really good about it because not good about it, actually. He was very funny about it. He's unfortunately passed away. But Richard Williams was a great British animator. And well, I don't know. Was he British? I think he was British. Anyway, he animated in England a lot for different companies out of England. But he used to say the same. He's like, those flipping in-betweeners, they're messing up my animation, and of course he used more colorful language than me, but but people don't see it, right? Unless you freeze, and that's the other thing, right? Now you can freeze frame stuff. Back in the day, you watch it on the theater, or if you tried to freeze it on your VCR, it's all like jittery and like all pixelated looking. It never was quite crisp, so it didn't really matter. But again, and this goes back into David's neck of the woods, where if the story is good enough that you've suspended disbelief and you're so engaged in what's happening on screen in front of you, you forget about those things. The times you notice those things is when the story is terrible. You got to have something else to pay attention to because you're like, this thing is horrible. And so you just start noticing all these problems. But when you're in that active suspension of disbelief and you're just really engaged by the story, I mean, I tell these guys, they're all like, what? If you watch Lilo and Stitch, watch the ears. Well, sorry, my wife's calling me. I guess she forgot I'm on a podcast. If you watch the ears, sometimes he's got a bite mark out of the top part of this ear and the lower part of this ear, and then in other shots he's got it this way. People don't notice that. People didn't write that in. People didn't come complaining and screaming about it because they were engaged in the story. But because, again, scenes get cut, things get edited as you go along. Sometimes now it doesn't make any sense for him to be exiting screen left because that shot has been cut, and now he needs to exit screen right. Well, you've already animated him exiting screen left, so what's the easiest thing to do? Flip him over and send him out the other way. But when he has asymmetric ear bites, they move around, and so you just do what you got to do to get it done. But people don't notice it, right? You probably, maybe you noticed it, I don't know, but most people don't notice it. When I tell people that, they're like, what? And then when I tell them, look at Jumba in that movie. Jumba in the beginning does not look like Jumba at the end. But you don't notice it because you're engaged in the story. But if you sit there and you take a screen grab of the two and stick them next to each other, you're going to be like, what the heck? Yeah, it looks Mulan, sequence 6, when she's sitting on the statue of the dragon and she's looking at herself in the water that I talked about. What we figured out how to make the ripples and stuff displace the image. She looks completely different in all of sequence 6. That's her cutting her hair. That's her getting the armor on. All of sequence 6, her getting out. It ends when she gets out on the horse and busts out of the house and runs off. All of sequence 6, she does not look like that in any other part of the show. So, but you don't notice it because you're engaged in the story. But now go back and look at it and you'll be like, what the?
I personally like really appreciate like watching a movie and kind of seeing the strings sometimes. It makes you it reminds you to the fact that this was made by people. It's not just like magic being beamed into your TV.
Yeah.
Like people came together and put this thing out there. Like I grew up watching Godzilla movies. That's my number one thing that I'm like super obsessed with. So
yes, my favorite.
My guy.
Yeah,
that's my favorite.
And, like, so many people, it's like, oh, that's stupid. It's a guy in a suit. I'm like, dude, it's so cool. It's a guy in a suit. Just like, like I love knowing that that's what it is.
He defies physics and slides on his tail.
Exactly.
He's the greatest. He's the greatest. That's why I love the new Godzilla, right? Because he's the closest thing to the guy in the suit. He's a big, heavy Godzilla, but he's awesome. And I'm glad you brought up Godzilla. I was in Tokyo last year, and I got some pictures of him poking over the top of the hotel.
Oh, nice!
I forgot what that street is. They actually call it Godzilla Street.
Yes.
But it has
that's a hotel.
Name.
That's a hotel you can book. Yeah,
I've seen videos. Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool. Speaking of Godzilla, and I'm sure these guys want to talk too. But I was sitting in the hotel room and I kept hearing these alarms going off, like, and we were on Tokyo Bay, and I was like, "What the frick? Is Godzilla coming?" Like just randomly go off, And I was like, "Oh man, we're gonna see Godzilla!"
Oh man.
Real. So my wife was like, they should make an animatronic Godzilla that just starts to come up out of the river. But I said, no, everyone
awesome.
would die.
that'd be epic. Yeah, I went to Tokyo once, but I was not able to see the Godzilla head on top of the hotel. It's life size too. It's like actually what his head would look like. Yeah,
it's really, really cool. When they were like, "What do you want to do?" My daughter was like, "I want to go to Akihabara. I want to go to what's the station there with all the crossing? Shibuya. Shibuya Station." She's like, "I want to go to Shibuya Station." I'm like, forget all that. I got to see Godzilla.
I came here to see Godzilla and nothing else.
When I was a kid, there were these books called the Crestwood books. They were like these orange. You get them in the library, like your school library. They were like these orange.
What was it like? Yeah, like black and white cover with like orange text.
Hardbound books. They were thin, and they had a Godzilla one. Man, I used to get that thing out all the time, and it like would show behind the scenes. It had like a diagram of a guy, like this like Asian drawing of a dude like walking in the pool, right? Like with the cameras and everything. Man, I love those books. They were so great.
Nice.
Yeah, and that kind of like ties in together like with that Miyazaki quote where it's like animation. It's like a dream, and I think that like in a dream you're also processing the world. You're like you're going to see all the things that you're afraid of. All your past traumas are going to come out. All the things you're worried about. All the things you're thinking about. Even the good things that you love are going to show up in your dreams. It's a safe kind of space for you to process the world and reality, and that's what the Godzilla is. Godzilla is a symbol of wartime trauma that has transformed over time. As it's kind of represented a healing. It started as something scary that you should be terrified of, and then it became a friendly protector of everybody. And that's what I love about art. I love about animation and very surreal type films and stuff. Like you can explore these very deep human emotions in a way that you aren't going to get in real life. And you're going to process these big ideas
in ways that are unique visually.
Yeah. Oh, dude, no, for sure. I was just thinking of like Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, you know, like the giant warrior. You know, I mean, the giant warrior is totally like his take on nuclear weapons.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like Miyazaki, grew up in a post, World War II post, nuclear Japan. And you look at and I think that's another interesting thing about fairy tales and about animation is that when you separate from the actual issue, you can get a different perspective on it, and you can kind of like see it, and you can kind of see something in a new way. When instead of having a nuclear bomb, you have this giant warrior that can destroy the whole world, and then you kind of think about, oh, like, yeah, this is actually not a very good thing.
Yep, and that's why I like don't really understand when people just scoff off things like animation. The fact that we need people like Guillermo del Toro to come out and be like, animation is cinema. Like, shut up. Like, this is something that we could take seriously because it's just as complex as any other medium, any other storytelling medium.
Yeah, that was a huge controversy with Beauty and the Beast. I don't know if you guys remember, but at the time, Beauty and the Beast was up for Best Picture, not
That's
Best
right.
Animated Picture.
I did not know that.
Best
actually.
Picture.
Yeah, because I don't think Best Animated Feature wasn't a thing yet, right?
Yeah, it was way before. They ended up creating it a few years after because of all of the controversy. Because the live action side was like, what? We're gonna have paint and paper beating us out as actors.
Yeah.
It was a huge thing, and I have to be careful. It was a huge thing. There's some inside baseball, but we're recording right now, so yeah, it was huge.
This is a great conversation, guys. Thank you so much.
Yes, I really thank you guys for coming on. One of my favorite things being a podcaster is just being able to have people who've been in the industry to just come on, talk about the work that they've done. It's very inspirational for us. We're kind of, we do short films over here. I'm working on one right now. So like seeing you guys kind of I loved when you broke down like kind of the whole timeline. I was just watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and now I'm making an anime. That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, that is awesome.
I love hearing that kind of stuff. So yeah, before we go, I would like to ask you guys like, where can we continue to follow the progress on Gabriel and the Guardians? I know you mentioned a Discord earlier, so
we just launched our Discord a couple days ago. I think we just hit like 110 people in there, so it's pretty cool. There's very active actually.
Yeah, it's blowing up right now while we're all talking,
chatting away.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think if you go to GabrielandTheGuardians.com, that'll take you to our different. It takes you to our link tree where you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
I gotta add the Discord there. So.
Yeah, you've got to add Discord, but yeah, you just go to GabrielandTheGuardians.com, and that's the best place to follow us.
Our Instagram and Facebook are pretty up to date, and then the Discord is has a lot of exclusive stuff that it's all going to go there first before. So if you want to see things first, it's going to be on the Discord, and then the first episode will launch in January.
Awesome. January, February. We're still from January-ish, around January. But yeah, I would say that like the cool thing about the Discord too is that we're in the Discord, and whenever we have time, we jump in there and try to answer questions and stuff and interact. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on here. I'm rooting for you guys.
Yes,
I'm very excited to see this. I'm excited to see the manga as well. Thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's been a huge pleasure.
It was a great conversation with you guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
We should do it again when the episode comes out.
Absolutely. I didn't even get to talk to you guys about the voice actors and awesome that is. Yeah.
I know.
Next time we absolutely should do a part 2 to this when the first episode comes out.
Let us know, and we could maybe try to get one of the voice actors to come
I was gonna say we could try to do a sneak.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Sneak voice appearance pop in.
We could probably get James or Johnny or somebody to come on and do.
Actually, we're gonna be meeting with one here in a couple of days.
Yeah.
All right. I'm watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers right now, so I'm very
Yeah.
excited to get the new Black Ranger.
Dude,
So
yeah, I love that. I love that show. Yeah.
anyways,
that Power Ranger is one of the coolest people on this planet.
He really
Such
is.
a nice person. I mean, an amazing individual.
Oh yeah. All of our actors are they're really amazing. We're so blessed to have the group of that. Anyway, I'm like going on now.
I will let you guys go. It's getting late.
Yes.
That'll be a teaser.
Next time.
That'll be a teaser for the next time, right? The next time.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
No
All
problem.
right.
Yes, thank you again.
We'll see you guys next
I gotta
time.
go put the chickens away.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.